You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey Vet Rehabbers! Today I'm joined by Angela Griffiths from Greyfriars Veterinary Rehabilitation and Hydrotherapy Referrals based in Guildford in the United Kingdom. Now we chat about a topic which I think a lot of us avoid. So for most of us, if we look at our day and what we want to be doing, it's treating our patients. But what comes with the job is often administration, and if you're a business owner, there's a whole lot more. There's management, there's financials, making big decisions, dealing with staff, and unfortunately the buck stops with you. So Angela really shares some great tips and advice for all of you that own vet rehab practices. So not just hydrotherapy centers. If you own a vet rehab practice, you can benefit from this podcast. And for those of you that are employed and are maybe thinking about eventually going on your own, this is also extremely valuable podcast for you. Before I head over to my interview with Angela, a quick word from our sponsors. Choosing the right laser therapy and PEMF systems for your practice are big decisions, and that's why Response System has been helping to make that decision easy for over 35 years. They offer Class 3B and Class 4 lasers, as well as a full line of PEMF products, which are designed for both small and animals and horses. All of their systems are fully rechargeable and adapted for international grids. So you can find out more at responsesystem.com. You can also come and chat to the Response Systems team at the Vet Rehab Summit. This is our online veterinary rehabilitation conference, guys. It's on the 14th of November at the end of the year. So I know for a lot of you, your conferences have been cancelled or postponed. The live conferences that you're planning on attending, you are not going to want to miss this one. So over to Angela. Hey, Angela, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Megan. Good to be here again.
Angela, won't you tell our listeners a little about yourself and how you got into the field of veterinary rehabilitation?
Oh, long story. About 25 years ago, I had a German Shepherd cross who had 3 intervertebral disc rupture. She was referred to Royal Vet College in London and had surgery. And as they discharged her, and the nurses were crying, and I now know because they thought she wouldn't walk again, but no one actually told me that, so I did the rehab. They said, take her swimming, and I took her swimming. And it wasn't brilliant. It was great. It was better than nothing. And I just realized the total value of it for her, but also that we could do things a lot better. And it was just at the start of veterinary physiotherapy. Hydro had already got going to some extent. We were still on dial-up internet, so all the research I did was sunny, fantastic outdoor pools in California. That's what I knew about. And then I ended up with a pool in UK, and the vets that looked after my dog Mia said, you know, why don't you start? I don't know, they saw something about me and said, why don't you start somewhere? I'd spent quite a lot of time at the Royal Vet College with the nurses. My dog was in for 7 weeks, which is a very long time. And that came, you know, I sort of helped out with other things while I was there, and they kindly let me go back and spend time with them after our vet said, why don't you start a pool? We've got a bit of land, and we did it. We dug a hole and built a pool principally and initially for my own dog, but also understanding that we should be much more professional. Hydrotherapy was of value to dogs with spinal injury, and that's really where I started. So I started with spinal injury, and I'd never even heard of a cruciate ligament, and worked backwards from the worst, most difficult thing backwards, really. So that was 20 years ago we started Greyfriars, but we also always knew that we would want to have inpatient care and do rehabilitation properly. It wasn't just hydro. We were very lucky with our first physios who came and helped us and advised us. We met the right people, we went on the right courses, and then in 2005 I did my CCRP, went to Knoxville, Tennessee to do that, with a lot of backing and help from the physios we were working with. And really that was the start, you know, just definitely accountants were saying, you know, heart over head, totally. We were down to credit cards, and people were bringing their dogs to us because they needed them to walk again. And we didn't even have paving down around the pool, but who cares if your dog can't walk? And that's how we did it. We did it ourselves.
I absolutely love all the stories that people tell me about how they got into the field. And it always is about some patients,
Yeah.
either a patient they've been treating or one of their own pets.
Yeah.
So well done, because you've actually progressed even further now, because now you actually teach the
Yeah.
field of hydrotherapy.
Yeah. That's one of my sort of greatest enjoyments, I would suppose, because everything we do is about animal welfare, care for the animals, clinically reasoned treatment, doing our absolute best. And when we started, there was almost no training or poor standard training, and things have come on massively now with the level of qualifications, the amount of knowledge. There's still a long way to go, but really my motivation is teaching people to do what we do really well, so that they don't make mistakes, that they prioritize the care of the animal over everything else, basically.
Awesome. And today we're going to be chatting about the business of hydrotherapy. So there are obviously a lot of people that have their own hydrotherapy practices. And what I thought we could do is maybe just go through some of the challenges. So what do you think is the biggest challenge that they face? Obviously now with COVID, things are a little bit different. So we can maybe say now how it is like now and how it was before.
I think probably easier to start with how it used to be before. And what I see is people having a dream, they want a hydrotherapy centre. They've either had an experience like mine where they've seen the value for their own dog and then gone on and done more, or they've worked somewhere and seen how sort of important it is, and then want to have their own business and be in charge of their own destiny. And I think one of the biggest challenges is now training is available. People are coming to training, they've already built their centre without perhaps enough knowledge, enough technical know-how. They haven't really worked out the design, that kind of thing. So that's one challenge, is sort of getting your training and your knowledge or working somewhere first. But the other thing is that they don't have business experience. And it was heart over head, and we learnt the hard way when we started. I was lucky that I had business experience with 2 businesses completely unrelated before, and kind of made my mistakes in those rather than in Greyfriars. Having said that, it's a learning. You're still learning 20 years later, but I think it's really going into a business without understanding how a business works, and without understanding that the money you get in at the end of the month is not yours. What's yours is what's left after you've paid everyone else and everything else, and they just don't understand the difference between turnover and profit.
Yeah, we actually have some training in the business section of the online Pet Health membership on exactly this, about finding your number. So actually knowing when your break-even point is. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems, is that we don't know our numbers. Because we're leading with our hearts, we are there treating patients, and the numbers are calling us, and all the financials and all the things that we're supposed to be doing, but we always find another animal to treat, and that's always prioritized over the business side of things. And so we let it slip, and the more it slips, the more difficult it is to tackle it. So we just avoid it. We just stick our heads.
And you just get busier and busier and busier, and your head's down doing the work, and you're not saying at the end, what's left for me? Obviously things are a bit different at the moment, but what I always say to people is, assume you will get no salary and no income for at least 6 months when you open. And they're shocked, because they think after a month they'll be able to start taking a salary like they did when they were employed, and they just don't understand. There's so many unknowns when you start a business, and all of your cash flow to some extent is guesswork, and you just don't know what you're going to have coming in, how many patients are going to come in, how good your referrals will be, what your running costs will be, even until you've been running for 2 or 3 months. So you need to have, not just borrow everything you can to get the best pool, the best treadmill, the best counter and design at the front. You need to know that you've got enough to keep going if nothing comes in for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. What are the biggest expenses for most hydrotherapy centers or practices?
That's a difficult, staff, I would say. I think Staff number one, but that depends if you're doing a lot of the work or you're trying to look after other people. Um, if you're in the UK, your heating, electric bills are massive, so your utility bills. In a warmer country, not so much, but then you're perhaps running aircon. So I would say staff and utility bills, really. Also, it depends on your situation, where you are. If you're in a high street setting or an industrial estate, or if you're in a rural setting, how much rent you're paying, how much, do you own your building? Are you paying rent on the building? What are you responsible for? What repair level? All of those things need to be taken into account as well.
Yeah, and I think there comes a time in a business where when you start, often it's just you, or sometimes you and somebody else.
Yeah.
And then it gets busier and busier. And then you get to a point where you have to make quite a big jump in your staff in order for it to run smoothly. So at a certain level, when you're running and you're busy, you're not actually doing things, and then the systems aren't running quickly because there's too few people. And the problem is, when in that situation, when you're also busy and then somebody's sick, then it throws you completely. And, you get to that position, you think, well, now I need to employ somebody else to make sure that that doesn't happen if somebody's sick. And then you have periods where it's a little bit quieter. And then you have that staff member sitting around, not really doing anything because it's not so busy anymore. And there's that, if I think back to my practice, it was definitely like that. We started off and we had a few people, and then I got to this point where I needed to take a big jump over, and you go through maybe 6 months or so where you actually are just breaking even if you're lucky, and maybe some months not, because of the extra staff. But in that time, you got to build up to the next level when you're even busier, and then you have all the staff to manage, and there's all that. But there is this shifting point where, and that's why it's scary. It's scary for people to take that jump to employ more staff, because they're worried that they don't have enough clients and enough income to be able to
and
them.
you can't you need to be able to service the clients you've got and service them well. You need to not have interruptions if someone is sick or if someone needs holiday. You can't just cut your appointments to take that into account, because patients aren't getting the treatment they need, but you're also losing income. But it's that balance between if you've got 5 employees and they've all got 5 weeks leave a year, that's 25 weeks of leave you've got to cover. That's 6 months of the year that you need to have cover for. So as soon as you've got more staff and more holiday entitlement, then you get to a point where you need to employ just one person just to cover staff holidays, or you need to have Christmas, Easter, whatever shutdown. So you have to consider that as an option. So that managing leave and managing sickness is difficult. Managing long-term sickness is very difficult because you can't employ someone to replace a person, and yet you can keep going for a couple of weeks and cope, but you can't cope for 6 months without that person, because if you can, you probably didn't need them, or you needed one person less. So something has to give, really. But I agree, that's the scariest thing. You're getting so busy, you can't get any time off, quality of life suffering, you need some help, but can you afford that help? If you can't afford that help, another way of looking at it is saying, like, okay, let's limit what we're going to do. We only want the business to grow to a certain position. We need to be charging well enough for what we're doing, for the hours we're spending to earn a living, and we stop there. We don't keep going. There's this idea you must grow and grow and grow a business. It must get bigger, and it's sort of the elephant in the room all the time. How much growth have you got? How big have you got? Actually, I think people are starting to look at it in a different way and saying, and I'm certainly doing this, am I happy with what we're doing now at this level, and is it actually more manageable? And I have to say, at the moment, more enjoyable almost, because I was in the office all the time, not doing the job I love, apart from the teaching, but looking after running the business and not being with the dogs. And now, because of COVID and the shutdown, I'm swimming, I'm in the pool, I'm with the team 3 days a week and doing 3 days admin, and things are working better. I think it's nice to be part of the team. It's nice to be part of the patients, but we can't be open for as many hours as we were pre-COVID. It's just not sustainable at the moment.
Yeah, I think it comes down to being quite focused on your goals. And I think that sometimes we throw ourselves into something. Like we want to be a canine hydrotherapist, let's say, and there isn't one in our area, or we can't get a job, we can't get employed. So we just open up our own clinic to make it happen. So, I mean, I think generally canine hydrotherapists are go-getters. They make it happen because that's what they want to do. Like you wanted to do this, you had this passion for it. But they go into it not actually knowing what the end goal is. And I think that it's really important always to know where you want to be in 5 years and 10 years. And it's okay to change what you want to do and where you want to be. But you do need to have a goal in mind. Because if you don't know what you want, and if I think back to my practice, I was very much like that. I was just going with the flow. I was just getting bigger and growing and growing and growing, not actually thinking, well, what is my big plan? Where does this practice going to go to in the end? And only when I sat down and actually thought about it was I then actually able to make strategic decisions about the practice. So you need to think about, do you want a massive practice? And the bigger it gets, unfortunately for the owner, unless you can employ a really good manager and afford to employ a good manager, you take a step back from practicing and doing the things that you actually love doing. So you have to manage people. And even if you have a practice manager, you're still doing management. You're managing your practice manager, making sure things are happening and finances and you can't give 100% away, so as a canine hydrotherapist, you need to think, like, do I want to be actually treating animals, or do I want a massive practice, that I see myself being removed eventually, and see myself having maybe some work-life balance. Maybe you have other people running it and you're not actually practicing anymore. So I mean, you really got to think what you want.
Some people start a hydrotherapy practice and don't intend ever, a bit like some people start a vet practice without intending being the vet, they're corporates. And some people I know have started hydrotherapy centers without, maybe they're more mature, they don't want to be in the water all the time with the dogs. They think they have other skills to bring, and they see it more purely as a business. And I think it's very hard for the canine hydrotherapist that really cares about their patients. Emotionally, it's very hard to let go and give those patients to someone else and trust them and actually recognize they have the skills you have, and they may actually be better at some things than you. I know that's something I hate to admit, but I'm getting older and just half a pace slower sometimes, so I'm catching up now. And I know for you, Megan, it's the type of personality you and I both are. You want to be the best at everything you do. That's you. That's how you're wired. So if you're the best, how are you going to delegate, let go, give that to someone else when they might not do it your way? But actually, something that's come out of the COVID thing is that some of my young staff have had a chance to really shine because they've had to really step up and really do it. And they've had to take on some of my role because I can't, strange as it may seem, do 3 jobs very well, and I can't do all 3 at the same time very well, and when staff start bringing you a cake and some tea and saying, are you okay, then that's actually quite nice, but it's recognizing they've actually understood that the boss job is not as much fun as it might look from the outside, but I agree with you, it's the goal thing. What do I want? What do I want from this? I'm pretty bad at some of my goal things, I would say personal goal things, but goals as far as where I want my business to be, the standards we want to work at, the reputation we have are really, really important to me personally. And you hope that your staff and your whole team buy into that. But you're part of getting them to do that, aren't you? That you walk out the door and you're gone for 2 weeks, which I am with doing overseas training courses, and the clients shouldn't notice any difference. And when you get a business to that stage, you're kind of doing something okay, but someone else might want to be hands-on every day, and I respect that as well.
Yeah, I think it's really up to you what you want, and be clear on that. So it'll guide you as to where your practice should be, and it's okay not to build a massive practice. You can just have you and another therapist. I mean, I do think that it is nice to have a team. I do think that it's challenging just being by yourself all the time, you know, if you want to take leave. But there are some canine hydrotherapists that prefer to be on their own, and that's okay if that's what you want, you know, but just be clear on what you want.
I think a lot of people are two-person practices, and they're certainly two-person when they start. Then they get really busy. I think one of the big challenges is the clients want more. They want you to be open for the hours you're not open, that you already said, I'm not open in the evenings, or I'm not going to work Sundays, you know, and then pressure. And you make those decisions. You don't look at the bigger picture and you say, okay, well, they really need it. They really want it. We need the business. And you've got to be flexible, and you've got to be available at times that people are available. So don't start a business doing hydro and expect it to be 9 to 5 if your clients are available evenings and weekends. But on the same sort of thing, I suppose what you've also got to say is, what do I want to do? When do I want to be available? And how am I going to limit those hours? And if you're limiting the hours, are you limiting the income so much that you're sort of holding the business back to the point you won't be profitable? And these are really difficult things to know until you run your business in the particular area or situation you're in. You can only look at how everyone else has done it and think, I might do it different, but you don't know until you know. It's that thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, those hours thing is definitely like the people in your area, what hours they're working. And sometimes it works the other way. You know, I was never open on the weekend, except the underwater treadmill towards the end when we got so busy and we had a really long waiting list. We started to open it on a Saturday. But, you know, for a few years, I was just open Monday to Friday, and we weren't open on the weekend at all. But then that exactly what you said happened, you know, we needed to open on the weekend. We just people couldn't come. And we were just open for the morning on a Saturday morning. And that was how my practice worked. Underwater treadmill all day in the week. And we worked from 8 to 5. So I think if you got to start as you want to finish. So if you're not keen on working late hours, then it's not going to be you. Then you're going to hopefully employ somebody, and then you're going to have to pay them you know, a salary that's worth working those hours. So you start how you want to end. But that's one thing that I definitely did learn when I had my practice. You know, however you are with your clients and what you start off with, it's difficult to change, because once they start getting used to something, then you suddenly say, hey, no, sorry, now we're not open late anymore.
And actually that's changed with us, because at the moment we're open 4 days a week, probably go to 5, but 4 at the moment, but with a bigger team on those days. We're not open evenings. We were open evenings before. Because we were open evenings, we couldn't just have staff that just came in to do the 2 or 3 hours at an evening, because it's not worth their travel time to come to you. You've got to give them enough hours to come in. So as soon as you start extending those hours, you're going to have 2 shifts almost, or 2 teams. And then you end up having what I found, where I had too many people in the afternoon, just so I had people for the evening. And always I was going through this in my head, that actually the evening is not worth having. It is from the client and the patient point of view, but from a business point of view, this does not make sense. And it makes even less sense in the winter when it's dark and icy and everyone's really tired. And I think it's detrimental to the quality of life of the people working for you to ask them to be working till 8 or 9 o'clock at night by the time they pack up and get home. And I know people do shifts in vets, etc., but they're not in the water getting cold for 8 hours, you know, and I think it's too much to us. So at the moment we're not opening evenings, and we may, I suppose what I'm saying is the COVID situation has given us the chance to change some things maybe we should have changed before, because it's made us tighten down and really look very carefully at each bit of our business and what we're doing. An example, slightly aside from hydro, is with inpatients, it's really costly time-wise and money-wise to staff, because you've got to cut staff overnight. And I was almost getting to the point where I was thinking, look, unless we've got 6 or 7 inpatients in, it doesn't pay the bills. It actually hurts the business because you're pulling people away. But then what happened during the shutdown, during our lockdown, was the hospitals, the vet hospitals, were under so much pressure, they had nowhere to send the patients needing rehab, and they couldn't do it themselves because they didn't have enough staff. So we ended up with more inpatients than we've ever had throughout the 4-month period, and that's still carrying on. So where I could have said, actually, shall we not do the inpatients because it doesn't pay, even though my heart says totally I want to be there for them and do that, it's now turned around completely, and the inpatients is almost like they've said thank you, and come to us when we needed them most.
Well, I think definitely what COVID has taught us is that we need to pivot in business, so, and that's exactly what you did. So something that was maybe not working for you, you pivoted and it's working now. And I think it's also this, this whole thing that's happened now with lockdown and coronavirus is an opportunity now to actually fine tune things, because it's acceptable now to make changes. So if you say to your clients, we're making these changes, they're just grateful that they can bring their dog in anytime. So now is the time. I think if you want to make any changes in your practice, it's a good time to do it now. You might have to see as things open up and things change if it still works again, because you might have to pivot again. And that's something that we're going to all have to just see what happens. And it's that dreadful not knowing. We don't know how long this is going to last for. But you might find that things change, completely. And the way that people are doing things, the way that people are living. I mean, if I look now, even here, my kids started school last week, and the traffic there's hardly any traffic. I mean, I used to sit for 45, 50 minutes in traffic. It can now take me about 20, 25 minutes to get my kids to school, which is amazing, because people are changing the way that they live, they're changing where they work. So all these things are things I think that we're going to have to think about in practice.
Here it's been amazing how quiet it was. It was just eerie coming to work. Literally, I would be on the road at points and there was no car on the dual carriageway in the horizon or in the rear view mirror. But now it is getting much busier again, and it's interesting how quickly people forget. But I will say with clients, they're being much more flexible about appointment times. They realize that we're trying to fit them all in, we're trying to help them, but we need some flexibility from them. Something we never realized, because we can't have clients in with their dogs at the moment, is how much better some of the dogs are without the owners. I mean, that's not a surprise, but how much better is amazing. So some clients do need to come in, the dogs really need them, and then we're all masked and PPE and all of that. But with others, they just stay in the car, we take the dog, and the dog focuses on you, and that relationship with the dog is closer. And it's just so relaxed. And I've talked to other hydrotherapists as well who are all saying, I really like this. I think I'm just going to stay with no clients and just have the dogs in, because it's lovely. We've got music playing, we can chat to each other, it's quiet. I hope no clients are watching this, because I do love you, I really do, but your dogs are much better without you.
Yeah, I think it depends on the case, right? I mean, you have those ones that you have to have the client with. But I mean, there's all these changes. And I think we just got to adapt and just go with the flow. I want to change tact a bit and chat about time. So, I mean, one of our things is that our consults and doing hydrotherapy takes a long time. And one of our challenges is to charge the right amount for that time. And I think that maybe is a possibility that some of us are actually undercharging for our services. Because if I look at the general hydrotherapy population, people that have practices, I think that a lot of them are not doing as well as they could. And I'm not sure why, but one of the things I question is, are they actually charging enough for the services that they're offering? And, often we, we'll have sometimes, especially if it's a big dog, 2 staff members. So 2 staff members, they're not treating a patient and we're charging them whatever. Let's chat about that a little bit. What do you think about that?
there's a couple of tricks to it, I suppose. Firstly, we make sure we charge for the number of people involved with treating the dog. So we have single assisted swims in the pool, we have double assisted, and we have multi, which could be 3 or 4 people if it's a very big dog with severe problems. And we charge for it, and the clients can see that there's that many of you involved. We plan our day around that so that we know it's a big pool. So profit wise, I need at least 2 dogs in the pool every half hour, and that's what we work on. But obviously, if it's a dog that needs 3 people, then you don't book it, you book for 3 people and 1 dog in the pool. So that what I've taken a decision to do is that I want to have more staff in on the day so that I've got those extra people for those difficult cases. So if I need 4 people for a water treadmill, they're available, and we plan the day like that. So we're always looking at each appointment slot, how many people are needed to do what, so that we don't overstretch ourselves. And you know, our receptionist is counting up, and she knows who's working, who's available, and how many people are available to swim a dog. So she doesn't book in 2 dogs that need 2 people, need 4 hydrotherapists, and there's only 3 of us. And often dogs start off needing 2 assistants, which you charge for, and then as they improve, they only need 1. So the client will often be saying, do they really need 2? And we'll say yes, because someone needs to guide the dog, and we need to stabilize pelvis or hips, etc., or give some input. But actually, as they improve, that may drop down to 1 person and become cheaper. So we charge for what we do. One of the things that's really important, I think, is don't have your hydrotherapist drying dogs. You know, that's not what they're there for. The client dries the dog, or you have someone that does that, because that takes up a massive amount of time, showering and drying. In the COVID situation, we're just taking them to the shower, showering them off and taking them back wet, and the client takes them away to our spare car park so they can socially distance and dry them. So that's it really. You've got to have, there's a big decision as well, whether you have a small pool and just 1 or 2 people, or where you have if you have a bigger pool, how many people do you need to make it profitable? And actually, there's not so much difference. You can run a bigger pool with just 2 people. I wouldn't suggest less. Your running costs are not massively different either, but your potential for income is much bigger, because you can have fitness swims in, sort of bread and butter work. Dogs that I've known for 10 years or 14 years have come week in, week out and paid the bills for us all the way through. And we're always there for them as well. And when they get, so some of those later in life, then I'm just breaking my profit rules. I'll say, look, they've swum with us for 10 years. Yes, they need 2 people now. They're towards the end of their life. We won't charge for it, and they know what we're doing and that we're being kind. So you've got to make those decisions, but you've got to do that being aware that if you're giving a person to that dog, somewhere you've got to make that up a little bit along the way.
So one of the things you said now, the expenses is not such a big difference whether it's a small or large pool.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. So like heating up, is it, you know, not say like if you have a pool, say is 6x4, and then you have a double size pool, the expenses are not necessarily double.
No. And typically, because a lot of, say, the 5x3 pools will be out of the ground, so you're losing a lot of heat, even if they're well insulated, because they're out of the ground. Once you get to that bigger volume of water and it's in ground, it's actually quite stable temperature wise. It doesn't cost you as much as you might think to heat it. Heating the space around is expensive. Hiring a bigger area or a bigger building for the pool is more expensive. So it depends on your situation. But the way I look at it is I can do much more and be much more flexible with that bigger pool. So we can have bigger breeds in, giant breeds, dogs that need 3 of us in the pool. We can have a family of dogs if necessary. And I can have those fitness swims in as well. That really, you know, we could have maybe an extended lunch break almost, where there's just a couple of us swimming the fitness dogs, so everyone gets their lunch break, and then we go back to proper hydro at the rest of the time. But often the fitness dogs have elbow dysplasia or hip dysplasia. They have, or they're just sort of osteoarthritis, but mild dogs that just need to be swimming. You can't pretend that it's rocket science and you're doing lots of fancy stuff with these dogs. Actually, what's doing the job for them is swimming, being in the water, you know. And then it's different slightly with the water treadmill.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela. Can you leave our listeners just with one tip? So if somebody was wanting to start a canine hydrotherapy center, what is the one tip that you would give them?
don't buy a water treadmill straight away. Start up with your pool, because that will pay for your rent. It will pay your income. It will build up your reputation. You'll learn all about the dogs and running your business with that. If you immediately go into having a pool and a water treadmill and all the demands of the water treadmill, how many staff you need and the cost of financing it, you are almost crippling your business from day one. Learn your trade and then come up to the water treadmill when you can justify it, because unless you've got a significant number of water treadmill clients, it's not going to pay your bills. It's actually going to make your business less profitable. So yeah, don't buy a water treadmill just because you want one when you don't know until you're running a business. Big deal. Save yourself £50,000, dollars, whatever.
Awesome. Angela, thank you so much. It's always great talking to you, and thank you for all your advice that you share. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Bye.
Cheers, Angela. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. I'm here every week talking to vet rehab therapists from all over the world about all things vet rehab. For more information about continuing education for vet rehab therapists, you can go to onlinepethealth.com. I'd like to thank you for listening to this podcast, and of course, thank our sponsors, Response System. They are as passionate about therapy lasers and PEMF equipment as you are about veterinary rehabilitation. They would love to answer any questions you have, so please feel free to reach out to them at responsesystems.com, or you can email lisa@responsesystems.com.